Are you ready for? Are you ready for?
Lately, we've been talking a lot about pallets, and sometimes the easiest way to break down pallets and which pallets are important are based on map. Gideon is actually one of my favorite maps, so we're going to start there. I think the easiest way to break down Gideon is by floor. On first floor, you have some god pallets or safe pallets, and you have lots of pallets and loops like mannequin room, and there's pallets and stairs by the forklift. Some other notable pallets like the side stair loops and what I call shelving loops, they can sort of feel like infinite loops sometimes. In the second floor, you also have god pallets and safe room pallets, pallets that are important like the ones that are by bathroom. Similar to Midwich, Gideon is also a map that you can tie both first floor and second floor together to create a nice long run for yourself. Let's start off by talking about the first floor of Gideon. One of the strongest loops on this map is Mannequin Room. Mannequin Room is easy to spot because, well, it's full of mannequins. It has two very strong pallets in it, and it's a great place to learn how to tie two loops together. When you're on this side of the room at this specific pallet, you do have to be careful of the mannequin's legs sticking out on this edge of the loop here. You will get caught on it so many times until you basically learn to avoid them at all cost. You should be able to loop this one pallet a few times before you even have to throw it. Mannequin room is a very strong room. They're very strong pallets. And again, kind of like we talked about before with pallets, you should really think about when and if you want to throw both of them during your one chase. When you do throw it, you should be able to make your way onto the second loop in this room with the second pallet. And if you can greed this pallet as well, you should be golden for quite some time. A lot of times the killers will get sick of respecting these pallets for so long that they leave the room entirely. Gideon also has another room upstairs, what I refer to as the forklift room because, well, it has a forklift in it, and it has usually a pallet that spawns next to the lockers, or it has a pallet that spawns up against the wall where these barrels spawn. This is one of those loops that if you are against a killer who is more of an M1 kind of killer, feels much stronger. Going against a killer like Gunslinger or Trickster, Huntress, can really feel pretty unsafe. Killers who can't close the distance across this gap where the stairs spawn are going to be much easier to loop in these areas. They're going to keep mind gaming you at the stairs because when the killer drops at the stairs where the forklift is, they have no fatigue when they drop like survivors do. So being able to mind game them, especially when the pallet spawns by the lockers, is a much easier loop. Going against a killer who is more of a long distance killer, this loop is going to be tougher, but they're going to try to go for those shots because they're not an M1 killer. Now, a lot of times this may help you because it's tough to close that gap. Other times, like Slinger here, he's probably going to get you eventually. But being able to hold the killer there in that corner while your teammates continue to get objectives done is important. Meat Shoot Room. Meat Shoot Room is one of those rooms on Gideon that kind of feels like a meme in a way. It's a great place to be able to lure the killer up a little bit and down back to the bottom floor just to be able to extend your chase and keep the killer away from your other teammates. Sometimes this doesn't always work, and sometimes the killer won't even chase you up to drop down into the tube to the second floor. If you can tie Meat Shoot Room into the floor that's below it, there's a very strong pallet in that room with a very long table. It's kind of one of those pallets that when you pre-drop it, you could kind of last in there forever if the killer doesn't break it. You can also greed that pallet for quite a long time too if you feel confident in that. The nice thing about Meat Shoot Room is if you can start up on the first floor, make your way down the tube and be able to greed that pallet for a while, you then have a corresponding room next to this room that we refer to as the freezer room. Being able to connect both the freezer room and the room that is below the chute can really create a massive loop. It can distract the killer for a while, and I do feel like the freezer room is underutilized. It has a spot in it that has hanging meat there, and it can distract the killer from where you are, and you can possibly land a really nice 360 in that room. Freezer rooms is one of those vaults that can really lend you a hand and get you on the other side of a massive corner of the second floor. These side stair loops upstairs are also very similar to the loops that are by the forklift room. You have to be careful of mind gaming here because the killer has no fatigue when they drop off the side. You as a survivor will stagger when you fall from that distance. You have a pallet that spawns at the back of the stairs where the biggest drop is. It's easiest sometimes to pre-drop that pallet and work there, especially if the killer decides not to break the pallet. This is a pretty standard loop on Gideon. This style here with the pallet and close to a set of stairs with the drop and the whole thing with the fatigue. Being able to mind game here a little bit before you toss the pallet and decide if you're going to stay on the same floor that you're on or if you're going to decide to go downstairs. Just like on any map, it's important to be able to tie loops together. It's important on 2-floor maps to be able to tie floors together. Being able to dip downstairs after you toss a pallet and make your way onto the next loop is a great way to extend your chase. These tall shelving units are a great place to be able to loop at. It's a great way to be able to keep your eye on the killer as you loop, as you can see through all the shelving. You can really mind game well here. No matter if the killer is M1 or if the killer is a long distance killer, you should feel pretty confident looping just about anyone here. These tall structures actually really work in your favor, as it's harder for the killer to keep an eye on you, but it's easier for you to keep an eye on them. There's a lot of distance here too normally with a pallet. The pallet is dropped and the killer doesn't want to break it and they try to keep mind gaming you. You have a really big distance in how close you can allow the killer to get to you before you decide to vault that pallet. You can vault this pallet back and forth many times if you can gauge the timing right and how close you allow the killer to get to you before you vault the pallet back. There's such a long distance with the shelf that when the killer tries to go around back towards the pallet on the other side, you have plenty of time to vault the pallet again and be safe again on the other side. Each map has their own important loops, and each map also has important pallets. A lot of times we call those pallets God pallets. And on this map, it is definitely the 2 pallets that are by bathroom. These 2 pallets save you from basement, especially if you have somebody like a Bubba or a Trapper who just happen to love basement. They're really good pallets because the killer has nowhere else to go. It stops the killer being able to mind game you and going around the opposite direction. They have to break the pallet to be able to keep going. You also have to be careful at this spot because when the gen is powered in that bathroom, the big metal door is open and it does allow the killer a gap to be able to mind game you at that first pallet. But if you can make it around the corner to the second pallet, you should be free to be able to escape into the next room. There are other pallets on Gideon that also help you create these kind of one-way rooms. They're God pallets in their own right because they force the killer to either break the pallet or go in an entirely different direction. So often these pallets spawn in between next rooms in these narrow corridors, or a lot of times at the top of stairs where you can drop down and you block the killer. Having the dropped pallet creates some distance so that you can get away while your fatigue runs out. You can always count on a pallet being in pretty much every single corner of Gideon as well. Especially where the stairs spawn, there's always safety of pallets, especially being able to bring killers up and down the stairs. You usually have a pallet on both the bottom and the top of these loops. You should be able to keep the killer here for a little bit while, again, your teammates continue to get objectives done. You're going to find T&L walls in pretty much every single map on Dead by Daylight. They're a pretty balanced loop for both killer and survivor. You have a vault, you have a pallet, and you have an open gap. Sometimes you have more than one open gap and broken walls of T&L walls. I feel that the most amount of mind gaming usually happens at these T&L walls because both the killer and the survivor lose sight of each other, and they have to use their experience to decide on which way they think the other might be going. If you're not that confident in grading a pallet, you can always pre-drop the pallet in hopes that the killer does not break it. You can take the time then to be able to fake out possibly a vault or faking out vaulting back over the dropped pallet. A lot of times just running up to the vault or up against the downed pallet fakes the killer out and it makes them backtrack, and you have some safe time to be able to decide what your next move is. There are some guaranteed gen placements in Gideon as well, especially in the bathroom. That's on the second floor, but it is by basement. So a lot of times on Gideon, getting that gen done first is very important. Even if you do have some strong pallets by that gen, knocking the gens out by basement on any map is usually a smart play. So often on this map, you can find gens by stairs as well. There's stairs on the corners of the map and kind of right smack in the middle of the map as well. Another way to spot gens are by these big closed metal doors. They kind of keep the room closed off while the gen has not been powered. Once the gen gets powered, these doors open and it actually creates more looping possibilities through the map of Gideon. This map is so perfect for so many different builds. You cannot go wrong with head-on on this map because there are just so many lockers. There's so many opportunities to land head-ons and so many different loops. Flashbangs always go hard. Plot twist is one of those that you need to be able to hide a little bit from the killer when you land a plot twist. Gideon is full of little corners and hideaway holes that you can land a plot twist and be able to get yourself fully healed again. Windows on any map is pretty strong, but Windows on Gideon is very strong because there's just so many pallets. We always love a good meme, so Power Struggle and Flip Flop go so well on this map because I'm sure you guessed why, because there's so many pallets. Being able to slap the killer with the Power Struggle when they go to pick you up thinking that nobody else is there and being able to get yourself free with a stun, oh man, it's so nice. And if you're on a map with lots of pallets, you can never go wrong with any means necessary and show the killers and the survivors just how strong you are. Just like the bathroom generator on this map, that is a guaranteed gen spawn, there is a totem spawn on this map that is also guaranteed. It is in this corner in this specific room with this row of counter space up against the wall here. This totem in this little corner by the fire extinguisher will always spawn here. I've never not seen it spawn. The other totems on the map are pretty much tucked into boxes and in areas that you're not going to see them. Just like pretty much any other map, they do try to hide totems. Totems can spawn up against the boxes, by the stairs, sometimes by the holes that drop down into the bottom floor. Sometimes there's a totem that spawns by exit gates, or tucked in around the boxes by the stairs, or far in the corners of each of the room. Don't be afraid to check down inside the bathroom, sorted by where the gen spawns. And again, up above the bathroom where the mannequin room is, there often can be a totem spawn in that little corner right before the hole. Now, I may have some unpopular opinion advice when it comes to finding Hatch on a 2-story map. Just like Gideon, Midwich, RPD, I find finding Hatch is easier from above. Gideon is most certainly a big map. You have 2 floors, you have lots of pallets, lots of rooms to be able to loop in. From mannequin room, forklifts, big tall shelves, bathrooms, hallways, TNLs, you get a freezer room, and you have a meat chute. You have lots of things to think about while looping on Gideon, but there's so many opportunities to try out so many different builds, different styles of looping, and being able to learn how to greed pallets pretty well on a pretty safe map. So have fun, good luck, next match, and we'll see you next time when we talk about Leary's. Have fun in the fog.
Let's go!